Some things just stick with you even when you try not to care. Like my Bluetooth headphones, these things were absolute beasts. I'm talking about a pair so stubbornly beat up that most people would have tossed them ages ago. But me? I kept them going because honestly they worked. Well, sort of. The volume always blasted at full blast. Apparently the controls went kaput a while back, stuck at max. That meant I never really got to adjust the sound, but it was like my own personal concert that followed me everywhere. Loud. Relentless. Unapologetic. Over the years I patched them up with blue duct tape in all the spots where they cracked or splintered. The left ear cup was barely hanging on by a thread, and every time I pulled them out, you could hear this faint, sad little crackle, like they were gasping for one more song. People at work gave me funny looks when I pulled them out, probably wondering why I'd keep something so busted, but they didn't get it. These headphones were kind of like me, I guess. A little rough around the edges, a bit broken, but still refusing to quit. So 6 months ago they disappeared from my desk. One day I come in, ready to drown out the usual office noise, and they're just gone. Honestly, I was weirdly indifferent. Maybe because I already thought they were on their last legs. I figured maybe someone borrowed them, or more likely someone just swiped them. First, I didn't want to make a fuss. I told myself, it's just headphones, not like a huge deal. Plus, I was secretly relieved to have an excuse to upgrade to something new. But then a few weeks later, I'm walking across the office kitchen, holding my coffee, and I catch sight of something. Blue duct tape, all jagged and grimy, around the ear cups of a pair of headphones wedged over a coworker's head. And not just any coworker, Mark, the guy who always seemed like he had a knack for borrowing stuff around the office. First, I didn't want to believe it was mine. The headphones were broken in the same weird way, that unmistakable crackle when he turned the volume up way too high. It hit me like a punch in the gut. Those were my headphones. The ones I thought were long gone. I froze for a second trying to process it. What did you even do in that moment? I mean, part of me was just baffled, like why would you keep using something that loud and damaged? And another part was kind of mad. I hadn't even cared that much when they disappeared. But now seeing Mark wearing them like some trophy, it felt personal. Like he'd stolen more than just a pair of headphones. He'd stolen a weird little piece of my daily comfort, my stubborn background music. Truth was, I didn't know what to do right then. Call him out? Report it? Just let it slide? I remember thinking about all those petty office dramas you hear about but never expect to be part of. But this was different. It was something small but real. It was that strange mix of embarrassment and frustration that bubbles under the surface when someone crosses a line that's just yours. So yeah, those battered, duct-taped headphones, the very symbol of my refusal to give up on something imperfect, they were being worn by someone who had taken them without a single word. And as much as I wanted to brush it off, part of me was already gearing up for the day I'd have to say something about it, probably way sooner than I expected. Because when you see your stolen, broken headphones wrapped in blue duct tape on someone else's head, it's impossible to ignore. And that's exactly what led to what happened next. The confrontation at the department meeting that no one could have predicted. So the day of the department meeting finally rolls around, and I'm trying not so secretly to keep my guard up. I mean, after realizing my broken Bluetooth headphones were stolen, I'd been on edge. Paranoid even, because those headphones, well, they were pretty much trash, but still, they were mine. And somehow they'd vanished right under my nose. Anyway, I'm sitting there with everyone else trying to focus on the usual work stuff. The quarterly reports, the new projects, the endless slide decks. But my mind kept drifting back to those headphones. I noticed someone fidgeting in the back. And honestly, something about their nervous energy made me uneasy. But I shoved the feeling down. Maybe I was just being weird. Then out of nowhere it happened. Mid-presentation, these blasted headphones, connected to my phone without me even touching a thing, suddenly started blasting this ridiculously explicit audio, loud enough that every single person in the room turned to look. I froze. My eyes darted around trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. I could see jaws dropping, eyebrows raising, and disbelief spreading like wildfire. The shock on people's faces was priceless, but I was mortified. And of course, without missing a beat, whoever was wearing those headphones bolted out of the room as if the fire alarm had gone off. No goodbye, no explanation, just a full-on sprint right out the door. I sat there, heart pounding, cheeks burning, trying to get a grip while everyone waited for me to say something. Honestly, I didn't know what to do. I reached down, frantically disconnecting the damn things from my phone and trying to mute the app that had apparently been hijacked. People started murmuring, some whispering, some outright laughing. I could feel all eyes on me, and I realized this wasn't just about the stolen headphones anymore. It was about what just played through them. Stuff that wasn't meant to be heard anywhere. Especially not at work. Trying to compose myself, I apologized to everyone, explaining as best I could that this was all unintended. And yeah, that the headphones were actually stolen from me earlier. But the damage? Already done. That moment was like a pressure cooker releasing. And it wasn't long before whispers turned into questions. Who did this? What exactly was on those headphones? And more importantly, what was going to happen next? It was clear that things were about to get complicated, not just for me but for the thief. And that's when the workplace started talking about new policies and cracking down on inappropriate materials. Stuff nobody wanted anyone listening to during meetings, let alone blasting out loud. But at that point, all I could think about was how something as small as a broken pair of headphones had turned into the biggest and most embarrassing scene of my work life. And that was just the beginning. So after everything unfolded, after my stolen headphones sparked this whole mess, the company decided to call a meeting. It wasn't just a casual chat either. It was one of those formal sit-downs where HR steps in, and they lay down the law about what's allowed and what's not, especially when it comes to using company devices or accessing certain types of content on work time. Pornographic material, they said, was strictly forbidden on company property, no exceptions. I remember sitting there, feeling this mix of uncomfortable satisfaction and a little dread. On the one hand, yes, they were addressing the exact problem I'd been dragged into. On the other, it was clear my little headphone incident had blown up way bigger than either of us expected. Meanwhile, the guy who took my headphones, the thief, didn't show up the next day. He called in sick, but honestly no one really believed it. The air around the team was thick with awkwardness and speculation. Over the next few days I kept thinking about what had happened, mostly about him. It wasn't just that he'd taken something that wasn't his, but that it had put us all in this uncomfortable spotlight. The whole thing had started as some dumb prank or lazy mistake with stolen headphones, but ended with serious consequences I hadn't anticipated. Eventually, management got involved even more directly. After their internal investigation, they decided to let him go. The reasons weren't just about the headphones. They threw in other issues too: attendance problems, performance concerns, and of course the whole mess with the pornographic content incident. It felt like a package deal, and honestly, hearing he was fired hit me in a way I didn't expect. At first, there was this strange sense of vindication. Like finally justice had been served. He'd done something wrong and there were consequences. Part of me was relieved that I wasn't being blamed, that my stolen property mattered, and that the rules had been enforced. But then, that feeling faded. I started wrestling with this growing guilt. I kept asking myself, had I handled it the right way? Was this punishment really deserved? Or was it blown out of proportion because of my actions? I kept replaying all the moments leading up to his firing. If I hadn't made that big deal out of the stolen headphones, would he still have a job? Did I unknowingly seal his fate just by deciding not to let this go? Those thoughts were heavy. There was no denying that what he did was wrong, but the fallout seemed so much bigger than the original mistake. I also started wondering if there could have been another way. Maybe I could have talked to him directly. Maybe I should have asked him why he took the headphones, or even told him to just talk to me if he needed them. Maybe there was some deeper reason: stress, personal struggles, or just a misguided cry for attention that led him to act the way he did. Instead, everything between us had snapped into this silence filled with suspicion. After the firing, I felt like a part of me had missed an opportunity for conversation, for understanding, even for forgiveness. And honestly, that feeling stuck around longer than I expected. On one hand, I wanted to move on, to close that chapter and put the whole thing behind me. On the other, I couldn't shake this complicated knot of emotions: relief, guilt, frustration, sadness, all tangled together. It made me realize how messy justice can be. Sometimes right and wrong aren't so clear-cut when people are involved, especially when consequences affect lives beyond the surface. At the end of it all, this whole ordeal taught me something about empathy and personal growth. I guess it reminded me that behind every bad decision is a person with their own story, their own struggles, and sometimes their own silent pain. And me? I learned that standing up for myself didn't always mean the story ends neatly with a clear winner and loser. Sometimes it leaves room for reflection and a lot more. questions. But if I thought that was the end of the story, I was wrong. Because with these tangled feelings hanging around, the next part of this whole situation was about to teach me even more about how complicated justice and empathy really